Hi there everybody and welcome to today's Art of Procurement. I'm your host, Philip Ideson. Corporate travel is one of the most complex spend categories that procurement leads and has been in a state of flux resulting from the global COVID-19 pandemic. How should your corporate travel policy change to reflect new realities? How do you negotiate deals when volumes are uncertain? How do you account for traveller safety? And how do you integrate sustainability into your travel program? Well, we will cover all these pressing issues in this 4-part special series brought to you by Art of Procurement in partnership with Egencia, the world's business travel platform. Today, in episode 3, I spoke to Caitlin Deegan, Senior Director of Strategy at Egencia, to discuss the elevated responsibilities that organisations have to protecting traveller safety and what actions they can take to minimise safety risks as much as possible. For context, I started by asking Caitlin if she could share a little bit more about her current role.
So I'm a Senior Director of Product Strategy at Egencia. I have been in the product and technology space, both in the B2B and B2C space for over a decade. But in my current role specifically, I help steer the product direction of Egencia, thinking about new areas to invest in or help incubate new product offerings. But my role, particularly the last couple of years, has been travel as we know it has completely been turned on its head. And how do we help travelers and companies manage and navigate during this period of complexity and uncertainty? So there are new use cases that never used to happen before, restricting travel within the domestic United States from, point A to point B. And so we've done a lot of work on the Egencia platform to help provide the tools to our customers to help support kind of their duty of care. So that's an example of some of the incubating new product offerings that I do at Egencia.
So for procurement professionals who are listening and perhaps they're not overly familiar with the travel category, but they're being given responsibility for the travel category, could you just explain a little bit more about the concept of duty of care?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that in simple terms, duty of care in the context of travel really means to take reasonable action to protect your business travelers when they're acting on behalf of your company, and not putting them in undue harm. And it's not only a moral obligation, but it's actually a legal obligation to make sure that companies are looking after the health, safety, and security of their employees and their business travelers. There's a whole host of ways that companies can support their obligations there from a duty of care perspective. So things like making sure you have a travel policy that guides reasonable actions or decisions around where can't you travel, or who can travel for what types of purposes, and providing guidance on that. Of course, leveraging a partner like a travel management company. There's a whole host of providers that can provide a number of tools, whether it's travel policies, approvals, reporting, so you can reach your travelers if something were to go awry. In addition to travel management companies, there's also like travel risk management partners who can provide additional kind of health, security, and safety services on top of that as well.
Now, do you find with kind of this responsibility, this duty of care to the traveller safety, do you find that HR are getting more involved in helping an organization build business traveller policies? Or if they aren't, should, as a procurement professional, be leaning into HR to help build policies that take into account traveller safety?
Yeah, what I would say is that it's not even just HR, but I would say travel and travel policy and returning to work policies have really been elevated to an entire C-suite conversation. I
Right.
think when I speak to a lot of Egencia customers and travel managers, their role has been elevated within the organization in terms of the importance and sometimes risk and concern, particularly in the current COVID-19 environment, right, in terms of around travel. And I think each department or function head would come at it from a different approach. So HR, incredibly looking after overall employee experience, which does include not only health and safety, but also employee satisfaction. And, if you're traveling, if you're a road warrior for work and you have a pretty restrictive travel policy, sometimes that can impact the quality of life for the employee. So HR, of course, cares about a number of dimensions. And I think it's how do you balance the employee experience, the company risk, travel cost, and all of the above. But we've really seen travel as a whole and as a category has really been elevated, particularly over the last couple of years.
And it's a great point you make, because I wanted to come in with my next question really about the balance. And particularly, again, when I put my procurement hat on, I think about the balance between managing cost and the duty of care, and they can seem to conflict. And, how far you go on the spectrum to duty of care means a 5-star hotel versus it doesn't mean, a 1.5-star hotel, as an example. Like, how do you help coach organizations think about maintaining that balance between cost and duty of care?
Yeah, it's definitely important. And I think there's a few different dimensions. And I think there are other elements to think about from a cost perspective as well. And what we've seen more and more companies think about is also what type of travel is permissible. And
Hmm.
thinking about, there's a lot of roles where, or types of travel that had been done historically that might be just as well suited on, uh, like we're doing now on
Yeah.
remote conversation.
Yeah.
But we do know that there's a lot. Travel has the personal connections that you build, especially in customer facing roles, are incredibly important. And so I do think it's important to think about that balance, and how do we balance what is the traveler confidence, which especially with COVID-19 has certainly
Hmm.
taken a hit. And how do we make sure that we're support, as companies and professionals, we're supporting our organizations to make the responsible decisions to trade off on a number of different dimensions. And
Right.
there's no perfect answer. And what we've seen is each company might take a different spot on the spectrum in terms of what they decide to optimize, whether it's savings, whether it's risk, whether it's
Hmm.
employee satisfaction, or things like sustainability. And there's a whole host of things in addition to costs that have been kind of front and center for a lot of our customers, and front and center in their minds.
Now, I want to ask a couple of questions related to sources of risk. But the first one I want to ask is kind of putting COVID-19 aside,
Yep.
because this is more, you're building a travel program, you're building a duty of care kind of policy within that travel program that is more structural and goes beyond the current moment. What are some of the things that that we should be thinking about, risks to mitigate and manage when it comes to traveler safety, and perhaps ones that you don't necessarily see ordinarily, or when you come to an organization where they haven't necessarily thought about that too deeply, where there's big kind of obvious ones that you can start to put into place.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course there's the obvious ones like right now COVID-19,
Yeah.
and or if you look at the news headlines, there's natural disasters like earthquakes
Hmm.
in Haiti or unrest in Afghanistan, and those might not be popular business travel destinations. So you have the big marquee kind of news headlines, but the reality is the more common and frequent things are around, there might be medical issues or accidents. So I got strep throat when I was in France traveling for work, as an example, or if somebody gets food poisoning or in a car accident or loses their passport.
Hmm.
There's a whole host of everyday things that happen when people travel or not. That are, when you're traveling on behalf of work, how do you think about managing, and what's the policy there? There's also, a couple years ago, we had the Boeing 737 MAX groundings and other
Yeah.
types of travel disruptions. And so there's a whole host of things, but I think it's, the more common ones are around the medical issues or accidents. But then you do have, civil unrest, lost passports, the national disasters, maybe not earthquakes, but,
Hmm.
hurricanes, super common in certain parts of the world, and very disruptive to travel patterns, and making sure that you have a bit of a playbook to each of these different scenarios, and what are the policies surrounding these if your travelers run into a medical issue when they're abroad, or if their spouse is with them, as an example. There's a whole host of scenarios that are fairly common, that you could build a
Hmm.
repeatable playbook of what's the stance, and are there any tools that you could provide, and guidance to your travelers in regards to those different scenarios that could come up.
And now, do you see, when a situation arises for a traveler, is it typically, where do they go for help? Do they go to their employer for help, and their employers, like either a travel category manager or travel manager or whoever it may be that oversees travel, or do they go to their travel management company as being the first port of call? Like, what's your recommendation in terms of how you set up that? I need some help. Where do I go to get it?
Yeah. So, I mean, my recommendation, of course, would be that the travelers lean on the travel management company. I think that's what
Yeah.
they're built for. That's, what we have, travel consultants all around the world that can, be a phone call away or a click away in the mobile app chat, right, to help support. I think we want to make sure that we're providing support from both angles so that if there's an event, a traveler on the ground can get help. And whether
Mhm.
that's um, through the travel management company, or even, a lot of travel management companies, you have specific guidance and messaging that you can put on the different platforms on where to go if you have an issue. But then also making sure that we provide tools for companies to do outreach to travelers. So
Right.
there could be the hurricane example. If you want to know if there's a hurricane, do you have any, or like the Haiti earthquake, maybe that's not a popular business destination, so not
Yeah.
the best destination, but easily go into a tool to see who's impacted
Mhm.
and providing the tools for the company to proactively reach out and provide any guidance as well. So I think ideally you're thinking about it from both sides of that in terms of how could the traveler get support on the ground, but then also how do we support the companies to know who's impacted and then provide them the tools to communicate with that impacted traveler and make sure that they're taken care of and they get home safely.
Yeah, and I'm guessing using that, your ability to do that and help them in those situations is a reason why um, a traveler should be using the tools that are put at their disposal by their organization to book their travel, as opposed to going outside of, going to more consumer kind of buying channels. Because by doing that, your organization knows where you are when a situation hits and can help you, as opposed to it being on you to be the one that makes the first contact.
Yes, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Now, I want to finish off just by talking a little bit about COVID-19.
Mhm.
Obviously, really, we're recording this in October, September of 2021, and still a little bit of uncertainty about really travel taking off again, and lots of different rules based on countries, based on, whether it's quarantine, whether it's entry requirements, exit requirements. How can an organization help the travelers who must travel actually make sense of what they should be doing, they should be going, and that they don't fall foul of all these requirements that seem to be changing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. And I know we were just chatting about this. And I think, I was just saying that road warriors are now novices again when it comes
Hmm.
to managing and traveling. And, you know, travel has fundamentally changed, and COVID-19 has certainly turned it on its head in terms of the restrictions or quarantines or mask mandates and everything else. And so it's been, incredibly difficult for travelers to navigate. I think first, before talking about what travelers need to do to navigate, which is incredibly important, also, as I think as a company, you need to decide, going back to the what type of travel is
Yeah.
permissible and makes sense kind of in the current environment. And there's a permissible travel model framework from Festive Row that I like a lot, that we've partnered with them on a bit. And there's kind of three dimensions to that. So one is around like the government permissible, right? Which is
Hmm.
exactly what you were saying, of what actually can I do, right? And what is allowed, or do I need to quarantine or provide negative testing or other types of requirements or health attestation forms, et cetera. But then you also need to think about like the company tolerance for risk, and what does that look like, and what types of travel do we think are deemed essential in the current environment that can't, couldn't be done remotely. And then you also have to think about traveler confidence, right? To your point, it's incredibly hard right now to navigate. And I think, the thought of an employee getting on a plane from Chicago to Texas, or even, anywhere in the world, a domestic trip,
Hmm.
that would have been, fairly high traveler confidence, and not something that an organization would really have to think about. But I do think there's a question of like, what are travelers also comfortable with? So I think first, as a company, you need to decide what types of travel are you going to allow, and make sure that that's really clear to your employees so that they
Hmm.
know the boundaries of which they should be traveling. And then once that's clearly defined, and then those policies are reflected in the the travel platform that you use, then it's okay. How do we help support those travelers who are on those trips that we've deemed permissible or essential? And what does that look like? And for those, I think that's where, again, I would say lean on the travel management company.
Hmm.
A lot of everyone in the industry has really been investing in different ways to solve these experiences. And so At Egencia, I've spent a lot of time the last 2 years building the Egencia Travel Advisor, which is essentially doing that, right? How do we provide the guidance contextually at the right time to travelers around what they need to know from going to point A to point B? And there's a whole host of things around, quarantine policies or other things that, maybe you could go from point A to point B, but on your return, you would actually need to quarantine for 2 weeks. So
Right.
is that something that your company really wants you to do to put you in that position, as an example? And so there's a lot of tools out there at the disposal. And so, but I think the first question that we're sometimes seeing is how and when should I travel again? And so I think it's really important to be really specific and clear on that guidance to your employees, and what type of travel is permissible, and then leaning on your travel management company to support your travelers in providing and navigating the complex environment.
So my last question, just tied to that, is how are you seeing your clients approach a traveler's comfort level in traveling, in terms of mandating versus really leaving it up to the comfort level of the traveler? And how do you expect that to change?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it much more leaving, like, that traveler confidence is a core pillar of that triangle, right? I think, especially when you think about the concept of risk or duty of care, knowingly putting somebody in a position where they feel uncomfortable is not good for the employee or the company. And so I think, I think over time, I think we're in a world that's fairly unprecedented. But over time, hopefully, the pandemic will be behind us, and then I think once it's commonplace and leisure travel is at its normal peak again, and people are the confidence is back, I think then companies can maybe take a bit more of a pre-COVID stance. But I do expect the traveler confidence piece to be around for quite a while, and it's going to be incredibly important. And so I do think we might see a shift in some of the types of travel that's done at a company.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast, part of our special series in partnership with Egencia, Pandemic Pressures, 4 key pillars to evaluate in your corporate travel program. You can listen to all the other episodes in this series by going to artofprocurement.com/travel21. That's artofprocurement.com/travel21.